Hello, it's Adedoyin Jaiyesimi here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the second module in the Mastering the Art of Church Communications Bite-Sized Comms course. In the first module, we looked at the foundation for church communications. What exactly is church communications? Why does the church communicate? What are the channels that are used to communicate? And what exactly does church communications cover? And I hope that module helped to set the context for what we're going to be learning in the other three modules. We're going to be speaking in this second module about creating your church communication strategy, and it's time to get into it. Whenever I am teaching people that work in communications, I always talk about the strategic communications framework. Whether you work in a for-profit organization, you're working in a non-profit organization, you're working in a ministry setting, as long as you are working in a communications function, it is very important for you to master this framework, because it is the framework that helps you to deliver the right outcomes that are aligned to your organization's objectives and goals. For you working in a church or in a ministry, it is what exactly has the leadership, the senior pastor of your church said that for 2026, this is what we want to achieve. This is our big picture goal. This is what we want to do. And using this framework, what it helps you to do is to align your communication strategy to be able to deliver those goals and those outcomes. So you can see why when you work in church communications, it's not just about picking up your phone and recording and saying, okay, we recorded this content, we posted on social media. How is this impacting on the overarching goals of this church and ministry? Now, I have a bite-sized comms course on strategic communications, and I also have a video on YouTube that breaks down this strategic communications framework. It's something that I teach over. Sometimes we have a course at the Comms Avenue. I teach it for over 5 weeks. Sometimes some organizations say, come in and teach my people, and we do that for like a whole week. It's something that, it's a classroom type thing, but I will run through it. But please watch those two videos so that you have a deeper understanding of this strategic communications framework, because if you can master it, your results will be different. So the framework begins with situation analysis. What exactly is happening? Environmental scanning. What's happening within the industry? For you, what's happening in the church setting? Are we living in a space where the audience is hostile to anything church or ministry related? The people that we want to communicate with, the people that we want to reach, what is their context? Are they dealing with high cost of living? What is the economy saying? I mean, even be like, I don't know, well, church was our own. But reality is that the people within the church are people that they're not living in a vacuum, right? They're living in a country. They're living within an economic and political system that you need to be aware of. So these are the things that will help to inform your kind of strategy, right? If you are in a context where the people cannot afford to buy data, then surely you cannot have a strategy that is heavy on digital communication. If the people that you want to reach cannot afford to buy data to watch a 1-hour video on YouTube. So these things are very, very, very important. Like I said, I can't really do a deep dive on it because I have the two videos, but all of this data that you get informs your strategy. The second thing is goals and objective. You really need to know what the overarching goals that your ministry or your church has. And this is really, really important because your communication objectives have to be aligned with those goals. So you have to be able to say what communications will do to contribute to the overarching goals that your church and ministry has set. And it is important for you to know that your objectives need to be smart. They can't be vague objectives. So they have to be specific, measurable, attainable, time-bound. It really has to be clear. What exactly are we trying to achieve? What exactly are we going to do that would lead to the outcomes that the church and the ministry has set in terms of goals for 2026? Next thing, we have to know our stakeholder and audience. Yes, the gospel is for everybody, black, white, young, old. But the reality is that different churches or ministries speak to different groups of people. And so you need to be able to do a segmentation. Who exactly are we speaking to internally? Have you done an audience segmentation of your church? Who are the people that we have as church members, segment them, and you can segment them in terms of age, you can segment them in terms of the stages where they are. Is it students, professionals? You can segment them in terms of location, but it's going to be very, very important. And then for your external audience as well, it is very important for you to segment them. Who are we trying to reach? Who are we trying to target? You have their churches now that they have their youth expression, for example, Standing Alone. They have a more youth focused approach. So they're focused on the younger people, Gen Z, Generation Alpha. And so they're not really focused on the older ones. Not that the older Christians cannot, or old people who are older cannot engage with their content or with their messaging. Remember, it's still about Christ, but it's like they're speaking to win the souls of this particular demographic. And you need to know what that is for your church. Messaging, the overarching message we know. So based on our situation analysis, goals, and the objectives we've set, our stakeholder and our audience mapping, what exactly is our message that is aligned to the overarching message of the kingdom of God, right? So you need to be thinking of your message in that light. So if I give you an example, when I was in Global Harvest Church, the mantra of the church was discover purpose, experience God. And the messaging was really about discovering your purpose, coming into Christ to discover who he has called you to be. So when we created content, we had to create with that messaging. So when you come across a content from Rev or you come across a content from Global Harvest Church, it really just inspires that theme of discovering purpose and experiencing God for yourself and by yourself, knowing God, knowing the word of God, experiencing God through worship, experiencing God through whatever it is that we were doing in the church. So that really fed in terms of the messaging that was shaped, and that was the brand messaging, overarching brand messaging of the church that then cascaded into our messaging for communication. I had to further break down that message into even different audience groups, right? So messaging is very important. Then you come to your strategy. I always like teaching this because usually people rush off to develop strategy, or the one that we like so much, develop tactics. Okay, let's do this outreach. Oh, let's go here. Let's do LinkedIn Live. Oh, how do you know? You've not done all of these things. How do you know it's going to work for you? And this is where, what I said about being informed with data, having your insights and your research, you then develop your strategy. Look, any strategy that you are developing that is not aligned with your church and your ministry's overarching goal, it's just dead on arrival. There's just no point, right? You really have to make sure that there is that alignment. And it is from this strategy that you will now develop your tactics, social media, content, whatever else it is that you want to do, your tactics, the how of how you would achieve your strategy. That is where you come in. Do not rush to start developing tactics. In fact, if you have not developed a communication strategy for 2026, it is time for you to sit down with your team and say, what exactly are we doing here? And how are these tactics that we are implementing? What strategy are they going to be anchored on? And how is it going to help our church to achieve its overarching goals? In fact, if you do not know what your churches and your ministry's overarching goal is, you need to start asking questions, because that means you're just communicating for communicating sake. It is not being strategic. And as a church communicator, it's very important for you to be strategic. And the next is risk, timing, and budget. See, we're in a season where people get easily offended. Trust is very fragile. So messaging can land one way or the other. You may mean something and then you post it on social media. Next thing, your pastor is getting dragged and you're like, what's happening here? And so there's sensitivities around messaging, there's sensitivities around timing that you really need to factor in when you're developing your communication strategy. And of course, budget is going to cost you some money. And then how do you evaluate? How do we know that all of these things that we're doing is working? How do we know that our engagement, okay, we've posted on YouTube. Do you look at the back end of your YouTube month on month, year on year? Do you look at the back end of your Instagram, for example? Are your followers mainly male or female? What age group? Which content resonates more with people than others? You really need all of these data to be able to say, okay, we're actually moving the needle. Are people coming to your social media pages and then that is translating into foot traffic in the church? How are you going to measure? Are people converting or giving their lives to Christ because of the things that they are seeing and the things that they are reading? All of these things, it's very important for you to be able to say, is this strategy working? Like I said before, this framework, please just watch the videos or enroll for a course that will teach you the strategic communications framework. Once you can master it, it really, really, really does make a big difference. Now, I'm going to share with you some things to bear in mind when you create your communication strategy for your church. Number one, which I've touched on while going through the strategic communications framework, what are the goals, the vision, and the values of the church? You have to stay aligned with your ministry, your church's vision, and your values, because that is what you are communicating, right? It has to be consistent. You cannot communicate one thing on one channel, then I come into your church or I experience your church, and what I experience is different from what you have portrayed to me on a digital platform, for example. So there needs to be that alignment. So you have to make sure at all times you are linking your communications to your ministry's overarching goals. There's some churches that are very conservative. So let's say you have a church that in terms of dressing, they're very, very strict. They're strict in a number of things. And for whatever reason, because of things that are trending on social media, you decide to portray a different type of persona on social media. But then people come into your church and the experience is wildly different. So you're going to be like, wow, 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 what's happening here? So you really have to be true to who your church is in terms of the values, in terms of what are our priorities, in terms of what are our goals as a ministry. It has to be united, because if you do not do that, you're going to now have what is called a say-do gap, and then that fragmented experience, it's not good. Remember, the overarching goal is to win people to Christ, is to show them our way of life. So there has to be cohesion and unity, and you achieve that by aligning your communication strategy to your ministry's vision and values. The next thing is, what do we want to achieve? What is the overarching goal that is guiding your strategic decisions in terms of how you communicate? In the early years of my career, I did consult with a number of communications team in churches, and they will want to do, because maybe another church is doing something, they want to do it. And my question will always be, why? What exactly do you want to achieve by doing this? Because this other person is doing this does not mean you should do it. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't or you can't borrow from other people. That's not what it is. But you have to be clear. What are we trying to achieve? And is this thing that we want to borrow, is it aligned? So again, you can see how it is all interrelated. It's not haphazard. There is thought to it. There's strategy to it. There is where we are heading. And so once we are clear on where we are heading, we know the things that do not align in terms of where we are going to. So your communication strategy has to be connected with that ministry and church's overarching mission and goals. What exactly are we achieving? Are we about this year, we want to increase our membership? This year, we want to transform people into ambassadors of Christ. This year, we want to equip our people tangibly in terms of this. This year, we want to be very focused on social impact initiative, taking our people outside the four walls of the church. What exactly are we trying to do? And then what is communication's role in terms of achieving that? The next thing is, what do we want to communicate through our service or our program, right? So when you're developing your communication strategy, you have to break it down into, you already have in your programming, you already have the things that recur. So if I give the example of when I was working in Global Harvest Church, we had the church-wide conferences that happened twice. There was Holy Ghost meetings, there was Harvest Fire, and then you have the regular Sunday, Wednesday. Then you have, for example, anniversary. Then you have things for maybe singles, you have things for the married people. There are things that are static in the calendar of your church. And so for every program that you're doing or every initiative, what exactly do we want to communicate? And when you begin to answer this question, it goes beyond, let's just record, take pictures, smile, and we go. You have to really think about, what is the message here? In how we share our recap, what do we want to emphasize? What is the theme? Why was this theme chosen? What is the content that will help us to showcase this theme? What do we want people to remember about this event? You think about it. Again, it has to be very, very strategic. And so when you now do that, it also provides guidance and guidelines for every team member. I remember the first Harvest Fire that I was in charge of doing. And, I'll talk more about it, but I had this brainwave of, let us harmonize all the communications teams of the different branches. And we wanted to speak with one voice. And it was so interesting. But I remember one of the first meetings that we had towards planning the conference. And I really sat down with everyone and said, look, this is what we want to achieve with this. This is a milestone. I think maybe we were done 10 years or 15 years, I cannot even remember. This is a milestone year in terms of how long we've done this program for. This is what we want to communicate. This is what is happening. And then photographer, this is the brief. This is the kind of shots that I want to see. These are the kind of emotions I want your pictures to evoke. Social media managers, these are the kinds of content that I need you to capture. These are the moments that we shouldn't miss. These key moments in the course of the service, we need to capture XYZ, and then this is the story. So it's almost like, if you think about it, those of you that are familiar with storyboards for advertising, or maybe you want to do a campaign and you have a storyboard, you think about it as your overarching storyboard, and everybody knows the piece of the puzzle that they are responsible for creating. And so we tell a whole beautiful, cohesive story that leads to the bigger picture. So it's not, there's nothing that you do as a church communicator that is haphazard, right? And it's not just about social media alone. It's not just, oh, people are coming, let's let them be waving. Why exactly are they waving at the camera? What do we want to do with that content? So you have to be focused on what you want to communicate and let it be clear to every team member. Next, what audiences do we want to reach? And I already started speaking to you about really mapping your audience. If you do not have a comprehensive audience map for your ministry or your church, I really advise you to do it. It's very, very important, because when you do that audience mapping, it also helps you to really know what are the needs of this particular audience. What do we want them to know? What do we want them to feel? What do we want them to do? Where are they in the stage of life? What exactly speaks to them? What are their issues and concerns? And then you segment it that way. That would impact on the messaging. That, in fact, can even impact on programming that you can take back to the church and say, hey, young people need this. Can we design a programming? I did that as well when I was in Victor Adeyemi Ministries. I got the senior pastor to do a live session where he was answering questions from single people. I think it was even Valentine's Day, but it was just based on real needs of that demographic and just wanted to demystify certain things. And it was such a fun thing to do at the time. But it wasn't just about it being fun. It was at it being relevant. It was being timely. It was equipping the audience, which was young people that were single, thinking about marriage, not too sure about it, really sharing just openly about certain things, or just answering questions. Like, so sometimes then there's some questions that you may not feel confident to ask, but under that guise of anonymity, they were able to ask certain questions and have it answered without feeling any type of way. So again, doing that audience mapping is so important. And you also want to make sure that you're segmenting your audiences per initiative or per program, because more likely than not, your church is speaking to a wide group of people. And so once you do that, you're now thinking about what is the best way to reach them. How are we going to build the connections with them? How are we going to nurture them once they come into church for the program? How do we maintain communication? How do we get them? Remember that funnel example I was giving you. How do we take them on that funnel of transformation? It's not just for them to come and be blessed and they just go. We want them to be blessed, but we want them to embrace our way of life. And so how do we ensure that this program is truly having an impact in terms of transformation? So you can see there that there's an opportunity to align programming and activities to the audience needs. And so if you have an event, for example, for the singles ministry, you know that is focused on those who want to get married. And so your messaging and your content will now need to be such that it resonates with their stage of life. I know that single people are in different stages. A single person that is 25 is different from a single person that is 40. And so you begin to craft your messaging in a way that it resonates and it's relatable to them as well. And this is the beautiful thing that I love about communications, is that we can begin to give insights even to the programming, even to the ministry, even to the church, that, hey, this is what we're saying, where we want to suggest. And that's really how it will work. That's why I'm encouraging you to work with data and insights to say, this is what is happening with this demographic. Can we do a program, or can we incorporate this particular element into this program so that it meets the specific need that this audience or this group have, because we want to see tangible results. And that's you really thinking in a very high level and strategic way. Next thing is, what kind of content do we need to capture? And so you can break it down. So you can see this, your communication strategy can be as robust as you want it to be. But I think at the end of the day, you really need to make sure that it covers every aspect of how your church communicates. So content, you have your general content that you plan to push out. That can be sound bites, that can be Monday motivation, that can be scripture. And then you have specific content that relates to your programs or your activities. It's very important to be clear about the content that needs to be captured. And you can see here, it has to be aligned to your core objectives and your audience needs. And you need to have your predetermined criteria and parameters. one of the things that inspired me to even do this bite-sized common course for church communicators is because, I've read so many articles about, churches are posting only celebrities. Why churches capturing people in their private moments, they're praying, they're speaking in tongues, they're quote and unquote, they're manifesting. Is that the kind of thing that you want to see on social media? Having a strategy helps you to determine what kind of content should be captured or should not be captured. Because, so for me, for example, when briefing, in the times that I worked either in Victor Adedoyin Ministries or the Fountain of Life Church, we were very clear as to what content that we wanted to capture. We're very clear about the emotions we wanted to evoke by the content that we captured. So it was less about getting people in their vulnerable moments, but more about, okay, what are we saying with this picture? This person that is manifesting now, why am I capturing this person that is manifesting? What exactly this person that is doing like this now? Am I trying to show that our church is powerful? Is there no other way, no other honoring way for me to communicate that there's power moving within the church? Or can I have a wide shot that shows, people, under the anointing, that doesn't narrow down to one person? Would that be more effective to communicate that message and more honoring than just focusing on this one person that may just feel afterwards, I wish they didn't capture this. So you really have to have those parameters, but you can see why having your why, really understanding what exactly are we trying to achieve, it then guides these choices and the decisions that you make. And then you define how your content will be captured. What will we capture? What won't be captured? So altar calls, for example, I was not in the habit of capturing people giving their lives, raising their hand to give their life to Christ. It's a private thing. It's a private moment. Yes, you're in church, but that's you making a decision for God. So things that that should be preserved, the sanctity of it needs to be preserved. There's no need for you to capture it, because whatever it is you want to communicate to, that you want that people give their lives to Christ, you can communicate that. It can be a testimony. Once you have the person's permission, you can tell a story of transformation that communicates people giving their lives to Christ, that can even be more powerful, right? Or it can just be a raised hand. The beautiful thing about the work that we do in communications, when we do it right, there's so many ways to achieve one objective. So rather than having you want to take a picture or video of people in front saying that they give their life to Christ, that you can have a very compelling shot, or it can just be a video. You might not even show people's heads, but as the announcement is being made, just having that cadence of different hands going up, it can be such a powerful thing to capture. So you really just, again, these are things you think about beforehand. Remember the definition. It's strategic. It is well planned. Good communication does not happen by accident. There's planning that goes into it. There's strategy that helps you to be effective in your work. So you can see I'm spending a lot of time here, because once you can get this, then you will find that you're having to deal with less of, why are we posting this? Everybody is aligned to what exactly do we want to do with this content. Why are we communicating in this way? What exactly are we achieving? And then it's easier for you to also measure impact as well, which is the next point. What results do we want to see from our communication? We need to have metrics and KPIs to determine if this communication strategy is working. If you're just posting on social media week in, week out, what's working? Those videos that you're posting, those sound bites, is it making a difference? Is it making a difference in terms of followers? Is it making a difference in terms of, people are going to watch the full video on YouTube? Is it making a difference in terms of people's life being transformed? What exactly is that content doing? You must be able to measure it. Is it just there for vibes? And we're not here for vibes, right? We're here to make an impact. How is it contributing to what your church has said it has set out to do in 2026? Are you getting more views? What are those views translating to? What kind of comments are you getting? Is it impacting foot traffic into your church? How many testimonials? You really have to, honestly, there has to be measurements done. I don't want this video to be too long, but you can track engagement, attendance impact, website traffic, email open rates, social media growth, feedback from data. You have to be data driven in your work, because it helps you to make better decisions. You can even see from your data if a particular program maybe is focused on a particular age group, but you realize actually more people outside this age group are signing up or showing interest. Should we include them? You take that to the programming, and that's how you begin to also demonstrate your value to leadership as well. And then the final thing to think about is, what feedback mechanisms are we going to put in place? Look, feedback is very important. We live in a world where two-way communication, you cannot avoid it. You are not just talking at people, you're talking with people, and people have an opportunity to respond. They may respond in a way that you like, they may respond in a way that you don't like, but you cannot avoid it. And so you have to be proactive about feedback. So how do we get feedback about our programs? How do we get feedback about our content? How do we get feedback about are we achieving our goals? Are people being, our lives being changed? Are people's minds being broadened? Are they truly being equipped? Are they using what it is that the pastor is sharing on the Sunday and the Wednesday? Are they using it in practical ways? So if a pastor preaches on Saturday, we as communications, we decide, okay, we're going to break this down into the practical things. Are people using that? Is that making a difference? So how will you get feedback both from your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders? And then what measures will you put in place to ensure that you are communicating as effectively as possible? You need to be able to audit. If you've not done an audit of your communications in maybe the last 2 or 3 years, really think about doing a communications audit. Are you really communicating as effectively as you can? Is your message resonating? Is it landing well? Are you achieving what it is that you've intended to achieve? And then what you can also do is engage in social listening to optimize your communication and messaging strategy, just to make sure that, yes, we're really hitting the nail on the head in terms of how we are communicating, what we are communicating, and the results that we're going to get from our communications. So I hope that was really helpful for you in terms of thinking about how you want to develop your communication strategy. Once you can get those things right, you will find that the other elements and the other layers then become easier for you to do, then becomes easier for you to work cohesively, then it becomes easier for your communications to be more impactful. In the next module, I'm going to be talking to you about how you need to structure your church communication, because more often than not, the communications team is usually built around volunteers, maybe one or two full-time staff, because of just the nature of the church is. So how do you structure your communications? Because all of the things that I've said, it's not a one-person job, it's not a two-person job. It actually requires a fully resourced team. But aside from even being fully resourced, is that it's very important for the team to be trained. So I'm going to be talking more about how to structure your church communications. I hope this module has been valuable. Please drop a comment in the comment section so that I know how you're finding these modules. Is it adding something to you? Are you learning? Are you gaining things that are tangible that you can use in your own content? I would really, really, really appreciate your feedback. And then I hope to see you in the next module on structuring your church communications. Bye.